Yeah.
Right. Good to see everyone on the chat as well. Okay, so welcome Miss Sophie's class to our class today. We're going to do something a little bit different in today's class. This is the last week of content really before we introduce your assessment 2. Which is next week. We're going to be looking at that. We'll talk lots more about that next week when we introduce that and what we have to do. And we're pretty much finished in terms of a lot of the content we want to go through with conflict, and we're about ready to put you guys to the test with that assessment. But there's one more thing I wanted to cover with you guys this week, and I thought it'd be fun if we did it together, and we changed up a little bit of the format in the class. So today I'm going to give us a case study. I'm going to talk a personal case study from my own life. I'm going to talk about my own country today because it's very relevant to what we are studying in terms of conflict and conflict resolution and issues of well-being as well. So our last topic we studied in last week was 10.9, how can well-being be addressed during a conflict scenario? So I want to give you another case study. I know we looked at some resource-based conflicts, and we've been talking lots about Syria, and we've talked lots about refugees, and we looked at some things in North Africa. I wanted to give you a different case study, this time a case study from a European country, a case study that's in recent history, and a case study from an MEDC country. Okay, so often when we think about conflict, we don't really think about it in recent times, and we don't think about it especially coming from an MEDC country. So I'm going to give you an example for this. This example is a very personal example of mine, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to talk about anything or ask any questions. Just put your hand up using the raise hand function, and you can unmute yourself, or Miss Sophie will unmute you. If you have any questions in the chat, just feel free to interrupt me, and Miss Sophie will unmute you and we can ask that question as well. So don't be afraid to stop me at any point if nothing makes sense. Okay, so let's begin. So as most of you guys know, I grew up in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, I'm not going to tell you anymore, you guys can figure it out. I lived there for 18 years of my life before I moved to Australia to go to study at university. That's why my accent is a little bit confused between Irish and Australian, and then living in the UAE as well. Okay, so what are we doing today? We want to gain a perspective into the complex nature of conflict resolution and the efforts needed by various groups of society to achieve the whole idea of conflict resolution. So we've done lots about conflict, we've done lots about well-being, and now we're looking at how can countries actually work to solve some of the issues of conflict resolution. So I'm going to call on some people at random to read some sections from me so you guys don't get sick of my voice. Jumana, you're the first name on my list. Can you tell me if we have done Mr. Sean's lesson properly, what is our success criteria?
Do I just read it?
Please.
Oh, I can identify the roles of both government and non-governmental response in conflict resolution.
Okay, so what's non-government? Can anyone give me an example? And anyone at all, feel free to unmute yourself. What's a non-government organization or an NGO? Can everyone give me an example of one of those groups? Just shout it out.
Are they non-government?
Can be, but who's in the UN?
It's owned privately.
It's not owned privately, no. The UN is made up of governments of countries. There is other bodies that work with the UN, but give me an example of one of those. An NGO, a non-governmental.
The Red Cross?
The Red Cross, excellent. The Red Cross or Red Crescent. I'm glad you said that, Alexandra, because that's an example I'm going to talk about today. So that's an example of a non-government organization, a group that is acting outside of the government. And we're going to look at that in just a minute. Okay, so let me show you some old photos of myself. You're going to laugh at this. These photos were taken when I was in grade 11, so I was pretty much your age. These are photos of myself. So I was very lucky when I was your age. When I was 17, or 16, 17, American company, they paid for me to travel to the USA. They paid for me to travel to South Africa. They paid for me to lead youth groups in Jerusalem. And we did a lot of work in Northern Ireland through youth groups when I was 17. Why would an American company pay a teenager from Northern Ireland 10 years ago to do all of these things? Why would they have bothered to do this? What is the idea, and how is that linked to conflict resolution? Would anyone like to hazard a guess, even if you think it's ridiculous? I knew you guys would like these photos. I like the comment section, Abdul Rahman. Don't be afraid, guys. So why would an American company pay for a Northern Irish teenager to go overseas and talk about conflict?
Because they were feeling generous, maybe?
Sorry?
They were feeling generous?
Jealous of what, Bastami? Explain.
Generous.
Generous.
Sorry?
Generous.
Generous. Okay, generous. Yeah, but what was the point? What has Northern Ireland got to do with America? What's it got to do with some of the things happening in Palestine, South Africa? What are the links?
Maybe they wanted like someone that has a personal backstory to go and talk to people and maybe show them why conflict is,
Okay.
how it changes their life.
And that's exactly what it was, Maria. So what they wanted to do, and part of this program that I was involved with for about 3 years, when I was your age, they sent me to these countries and we worked together with different teenagers and we ran some youth groups and we talked about personal stories of growing up in a conflict conflict situation. We have a lot of students at this that have grown up in conflict scenarios, or they've grown up with some sort of conflict in their lives or in their countries, and we have a lot of stories. Mine is just one of them, and it's definitely something that I'm going to share with you guys today. So they ran these groups to get teenagers to work together and learn about each other's countries and learn about how we can resolve conflict. So if we know the story and the answer to that in one country, we could potentially apply it to another country. Okay, so these are some photos of me in South Africa, in New York. This is me in the West Bank of Palestine, and you can see the flags there. Okay, so my country is called Northern Ireland. This is where I was born and I grew up. Who owns Northern Ireland? Where does it belong in the urban geography? Feel free to have a guess, have any suggestions.
United
UK.
Kingdom.
The UK?
Yeah? Who else is in the UK? Tell me.
Isn't there
Scotland.
Wales, Scotland, England.
London?
London is not a country.
London. And yeah, Northern Ireland.
Yeah,
And,
so we have 4 countries in the UK. We have England, Wales, Scotland, and then there's this one random one on the opposite side of the ocean. Why is that? Does anyone know why the UK have this extra little bit called Northern Ireland? Any country?
Mr. Sean,
Yep.
Agreed.
don't you have like both the Irish passport and the UK passport?
That's why I'm taking this lesson today. Why is that?
Because like Ireland claims that Northern Ireland's for them, and the UK claims that Northern Ireland is for them. So like they're fighting over it.
Yep. So for a long time, it was a disputed territory. This little part of Northern Ireland, for a long time, the north of Ireland was part of the disputed territory. So in order to understand why we have this really, really weird borders and geography, we need to look back in history. And when you look at any type of map in your studies of geography in year 10, and you look at something that kind of doesn't make sense, there's little weird lines drawn, there's always an explanation as to why that looks the way it is. Remember when we talked about resource-based conflict and we looked at Namibia, and Namibia had this little extra tiny little bit to the side. What was the point of that? Can anyone remember? I don't know if you guys can see.
Can you repeat, Mr. Sean?
Remember when we did resource-based conflict? We did the case study of Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, and Angola. And
Mr.
Namibia
Arifan
had
water
an
in
extra
the
part
chat.
of land. What was that for?
That part actually contained a very important water source.
Mhm.
And so the water conflict actually made that area very disputable. And so that area of Namibia was actually very well guarded. And there were actually a lot of armed troops defending the area. So basically, it's an ongoing conflict.
Excellent. Yeah, so it's an ongoing conflict. Namibia wanted access to that water source, and that was a border that was drawn up by that. So excellent. I'm seeing some awesome ideas in the comment section. Don't be afraid to say these out loud, guys. You don't just need to type them. Thank you, Tezkir. Thank you, Saeed. Thank you for those people who answered that. So when there's a weird-looking border on a map, there's always a reason. There's always a history. So let me tell you the history. If I have everyone's attention, let me tell you the history of this. Okay, so actually, before we get to this, let's look at this. We did this last year. Those of you guys in my class last year, history term 1, grade 9, we talked about colonial empires. We talked about imperialism. This is Britain. This is Britain across history. Look how much land that the British colony controlled at one point of time. So this is land they had over a long period of history. One of those is the whole island of Ireland. So at one point they controlled the whole island of Ireland. And this was obviously contentious, as was the controlling of all these other countries as part of the colonial empire. They had problems that came along with this, and many of conflicts we've looked at through grade 9 and through grade 10. Okay, so does anyone want to try and decipher this map for me? Does anyone want to try and explain this confusing map for me? This is why we have this weird border. Why do we have all these different terms? Study it carefully. You guys are good at maps. You've done 3 terms of geography already.
So Ireland composes of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. The United Kingdom includes Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales, and Great Britain just includes Scotland, England, and Wales.
Scotland and then Wales. Excellent. So they've got Great Britain, Scotland, England, and Wales. Okay. And what about the British Isles, Maria?
It's all of them.
It's all of them together. Okay. So the reason this is super confusing in terms of our maps and our mapping skills is because we have got a mixture here of political and geographic terms. Okay. So some of these are actual countries and some of these are just terms. Ali Khan says, are those areas colonized by a specific country? Yes, at one point they were all colonized by the British Empire and by the English. Yep. Conflict research. Ben says this is outrageous. Okay. So yeah, so it's pretty confusing. We've got a mixture of terms between political and geographic. So the British Isles is a geographic term. It includes all of the countries, the 5 countries you see on the map. Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. UK includes 4 of those countries, includes Scotland, England, Wales, and then the extra country of Northern Ireland. And what are we missing? The island of Ireland includes Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which are 2 geographic areas. And Tezkir, a nice sibling you've got there to join our class. Welcome. I hope they learned something today. Okay, so why is this? Why do we have these weird geographic and political terms? And like Bastami said, for people from Northern Ireland, because of this conflict, they can have a UK passport or they can have a passport for the whole island of Ireland. This is where it gets really confusing. So when we're looking at conflict, often people get very emotional and they get very political and they get very offended when you use the wrong terms, because potentially people identify and their identity is attached to a particular place. And that's why this particular conflict is very confusing. People from what area? Are they British? Are they Irish? Are they European? Are they part of the UK? Are they part of the British Isles? Are we all the same? Are we different? And this is something we got to be really careful when we're talking about any case study really to do with conflict. Okay, so why is this? Obviously, like we looked at before, Britain were controlling everything. Britain controlled the whole island of Ireland. Then we had a war. We had the War of Independence, which was 1920. Then we had 1921. The British government decided they were going to make the country of Northern Ireland. So this country is only made, my country that I grew up in is only made in 1921. It's not that much older than the United Arab Emirates, which is also considered to be quite a recent country, a political country. So our capital is Belfast. We have a pretty much Christian majority, pretty much 83% are Christian. So like like a lot of countries in this part of Europe, pretty much everybody is of the same religion. However, between that religion, we've got two main distinctions. So in Christianity in Ireland, it's split up between people that are Protestant and people that are Catholic. And these are both Christian communities. They both have the same overarching religion, but how it acts in the day-to-day and some of the rules are a little bit different. Now, the problem with Ireland and the whole origin of the conflict boils down to these two sides, okay? So, Mahmoud, can you read to me the side with the UK flag?
Protestants,
Yep.
English language, Unionists,
Yeah.
and Loyalists.
Excellent. So the people on the British side of things, if you want to use that term British, and they identified with the Protestant side of their religion, which is a different group of Christianity. They majorly spoke English language, and they believed in the Union of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is the Union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the four countries, and they were loyal. They were loyal to the Queen of England, who you've all seen and you know very well from our studies last year in history. Tell us the other side, please, Shamsa. The other side with the green, white, and orange flag. Shamsa, are you there? Don't let us down. Ben, can you help her out? I think we've lost Shamsa.
Mister, what do I do?
Yeah, I would like you to read the other side of the table that Mahmoud read.
Okay. Which side is that, Mister?
The one with the green, white, and orange flag. If you're paying attention.
Catholics. Yeah, Catholics, Irish language, nationalists, and Republican.
Okay, so you have a population separated on many things. Okay, like a lot of conflicts, this population is separated on religion, they're separated on language, and they're separated on politics, and they also believe in a different form of government as well. So these two groups of people, although you look at them, they look the same, you might think they sound the same, and you might think, oh, they're all Irish people or they're all British people. There is two groups of people that made this conflict so difficult and made this conflict exist, and they have a lot of differences that maybe doesn't meet the eye. Okay, so what do we do when we've got a country and it's got two very different populations of people, politics, language, religion, potentially ethnicity as well? They might look at different sides of where their families have come from. How do we solve this problem? Okay, and let me tell you now, this conflict was pretty bad. This conflict was really bad in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. But these photos that I'm showing you have all been taken in the last 5 years. So this conflict is still alive, and it's still an issue for these two groups of people that are living in this one geographic area. So how can we solve this conflict? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I just want to hear your ideas, no matter how crazy they are. I don't want you to research anything. I just want you to discuss in a small group. I'm going to put you in a completely random group. Could be with Miss Sophie's class, could be with Mr. Sean's class. And I want you to think of a solution to how we can let these two people live in one area peacefully and safely, so all of their areas of well-being are addressed. So Miss Sophie is going to put you into a random group of 4, about 4 people per group, could be any class, and you're going to have to come up with solutions. So imagine you are the UK or the Irish government, and what is one solution, or even a couple of things you could do to help these two groups of society work together?
Okay, set them up.
Yep, set them up. 5 minutes max.
Right.
From Google.
Okay. Right, have we got everybody back? Is anyone still in the room? It says 37.
Yeah, there's not anyone in the breakout rooms. They're shut now, so.
Okay, excellent. Okay, Ali Khan, help me out here. You there?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Okay, Ali Khan, we've got this problem with the British government. How do we solve it?
Basically, Mr. Right, we had a really, I mean, it's not the best idea, right? So me, Mohammed Sawidi,
yep.
Hamza, that came up with the idea, right? We're gonna make them sit down, and we're basically gonna, sort the idea and be like, okay, so we're gonna ask them to revert to Islam. That's what we thought of. You know.
Wait, say again?
So basically, this is based on religion, right?
Yeah.
Two different. Yeah.
Oh,
so-
you're gonna get them to convert to one religion.
Yeah.
Okay,
Pretty much.
so right. Okay, interesting. I hadn't thought about this.
So we make them realize that they're all from one religion at the end of the day.
Okay, so you want to give them something to unify both sides with.
Pretty
Yeah.
much. Pretty much.
Okay, will this be enough to tackle the other differences? We've got a language difference, we've got a political difference.
Yeah.
I'm
No.
not arguing with you, I'm just asking.
Oh, it depends how they take it. You know, if they don't really accept, right?
Yep.
Problems are still gonna continue.
Okay, interesting
Yeah.
solution.
Be fine. Yeah.
Okay, I liked it. Yazan, who was in your group?
Said and Farzan.
Okay, so what's your solution?
First, Said suggested we have sanctions and restrictions to force group into different actions,
Right, interesting.
like North Korea kind of
Okay.
thing.
So sanction both sides?
Yes.
Okay, so then that would force them to say, like, we're not gonna let you import or export anything until you solve your own problems.
Yeah, and Said suggested that the problem would solve itself later on. It'll take a few years or maybe more, but the problem would just solve itself. But I think that all that is gonna collapse at the end. So,
Right. So time itself could be a solution to this political religious divide.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Interesting. There's definitely some weight to that. Aisha, who was in your group? I like these suggestions, guys. They're good. Aisha, you there? I can't hear from her. Let's get one more person. Someone we haven't heard of. Azza, are you there? Azza, can you hear us? Help us out here. You got 2 classes waiting for you. Okay, last one. Farah El Saka, are you there?
We didn't really find anything that would fix it, but we were just talking about why, what the cause was.
Okay, and what do you think the biggest cause is?
Obviously, different beliefs, but
Yep.
also maybe lack of resources and stuff. They might have things that the other country might not.
Excellent. One more comment from Ali. I really like all the suggestions. Ali, last one.
I'm in Farah's group, but
That's
we
okay.
came to one solution. One of the solutions is the negotiation. It basically results in peace and probably the same mindset as well.
Okay, so if we can get both parties to the table to negotiate their problems, and that might solve the issue. Okay, interesting. I like all these ideas. I like the difference. So the truth is, behind these groups, it's a lot more than just religion. It started on a religious divide, but it became, as a policy of colonization, it became a political divide, and it also became a language issue as well, because there's 2 different languages at play here as well. So we looked at Northern Ireland. Okay, so let's have a look at the actual conflict that happened. I'm just flicking through this quite quickly. This is the actual conflict that happened. Like I said, there's still elements of this conflict today in 2020. It still happens, but it's not as bad as it used to be. So I think it was Yazan's group that said maybe time itself could heal this, and that is a good suggestion. Time itself has actually helped solve this problem. It's not the only solution, but it has helped solve this problem. So this was the conflict at its very, very worst. I'm just going to check the time to make sure we're not going over. We'll continue this next lesson. I've got about 10 minutes left. Conflict was at its very worst from the 1960s to 1998. Okay. Now, you guys know, most of you know how old I am. I was not alive for most of this, but I was alive for the end of the conflict and the peace agreement, and to see some of this aspect still going on. It involved a lot of stakeholders. So getting them to negotiate, like Mr. Noito said, was a good idea, but it was difficult because one of those stakeholders was the British Army, and the rest of them were not so official. The rest of them were groups of people. Some of them like to refer to themselves as freedom fighters. Some of them were labeled as terrorist groups. Some of them were labeled as gangs. Some of them were labeled as groups, you know, armed militias. There was a lot of terms going around, but the other groups that the negotiation were trying to go on with were not as easy as what we would have liked, because there wasn't just one leader to these groups. It was very, very problematic. So you had some crazy photos coming out of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you know, children going to school with guns beside them, guys screaming at the army like you see at the start, you know, and this was a conflict that was felt by everyone. And so over the period of time, over this period of, let's say, about 30, 40 years, and we only had, well, when I say only, we had 3,600 deaths. Now, I know compared to a lot of wars, this actually sounds like a relatively low number, but remember, my whole country has less population than Sharjah. So it's a very small country. We're talking a population at the time of just over 1 million people. So this is a big number to have died from a conflict like this, a political conflict, and with religious connections, obviously. Okay, so it was referred to as a civil war by many people. It never actually got this official title by the United Nations, but it was in many regards a civil war between two groups of society. So in terms of what we did in 10.1, different types of conflict, this would be a civil war. And more specifically, it was a political war and a land-based conflict. So they were fighting over land. And like Bastami said at the start, the island of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, wanted the whole island, and the UK wanted that little bit at the top, and they wanted to remain like this. So it was a big, big problem. Over this time, we had some really crazy stories, and we had some really crazy times. During my childhood, I remember getting evacuated from school because we had a bomb. Someone actually bombed the school. Can you believe? My dad went to work one day and his whole office was bombed, and nothing left, no windows, no walls, nothing. And he worked for the government, so a lot of times the terrorist groups like to target the government. He worked for the British government. My mom's a dentist. One day she went into work and her entire dental surgery completely bombed. So it happened at the same time, yeah. So they even targeted, I don't think they were trying to target healthcare workers, doctors and dentists, but it happened, and they got involved in conflicts during this time. So it was a pretty crazy time right up until 1998, and even the last shooting I had in my village happened in 2009. So it still happened. It still continued even after the formal peace agreement. Okay, so Belfast, the capital, is seen to be we call it Europe's most bombed city, and we also call it Europe's most divided and walled city. So it's referred to as the most walled city in Europe. Now, of course, when we think of walls, and you guys are studying history, most of you think of European walls, you think of Berlin. Today in Belfast, in my city, we have more walls than they had at the height of the Cold War in Berlin. So we have more walls separating people today in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, than they ever had in Berlin. And this is a big problem. So you guys said that we were going to get, I asked you for some solutions, and I said to you, what are you going to solve this? Some of you said we'd negotiate, some of you said we'd make them change their religion so they're all same, give them something similar to unify the population. And we had some great solutions there. But none of you said we would separate the two groups. And that's exactly what happened. These two groups got separated in the city. And I'm going to ask you guys a question. I'm going to pick someone at random to answer me this question before we finish up today. Now, this question appears on every single geography and global politics and global studies exam you'll ever sit. I'm going to ask the question. My random volunteer today is going to be, let's have a look at my list, Yara A. Are you there for me?
Hi.
Yep. Hi, Yara. Okay, Yara, this is the first question you get on every single geography and global politics exam. Describe the distribution using geographic terms of the two groups on the map.
Okay.
Just from what you know.
I mean, most of it is the yellow.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very small amount of the green.
Okay, so let's start. Who are the yellow? We have two religious groups here.
The Protestant, and then there's a Catholic.
Okay, so using geographic terms, east, west, north, help me out. Where are the yellow?
The yellow are on the west and the northeast.
Yep. And where is the green? The Catholic population.
The Catholic population is like the southwest.
Okay, it's in southwest, and there's little pockets in the west as well, we can see. Excellent, thank you for that, Yara. Now, Ali Nawito, you told me we needed to get these people working together to solve the conflict. Ali, can you help me? Does this map, just from what you know, I know you're not an expert on the conflict, but from looking at this map, does this show you cooperation or does it show you conflict from what you can see on the map with these two groups?
I would say a conflict.
Why?
Because there's Protestants. It's mainly on the map right here. So that would probably say that it's a conflict.
Right. Are they working together from this map? Like what you suggested?
Looking at the major peace lines, I could probably say that.
Okay, you could probably say that. Right, so let me tell you a bit more about why this is such a big problem and why this is the most walled city in Northern Ireland, or in the whole of Europe, sorry, the most walled city. So these groups are together, and those red lines are called peace lines. Now, I'm using the word peace like this because they secure peace, but they're not actually very peaceful. Those lines where they've built those walls are because there's been conflict between those two groups of people, armed conflict. So I'm talking bombs, guns, this is like fighting, rioting, this sort of thing. So these walls have been built to separate two communities, and actually as a result from the government to solving this issue. Okay, so let's have a look at what these lines look like. And again, these photos are not old photos. These photos are all taken in the last 5 years. So these are walls that they have created. Some of them look nice, some of them got nice graffiti, some of them are ugly, some of them are really tall, some of them are shorter. And this is what I'm talking about, a walled city. So that's why I've used the word peace like this, because I want you guys to think about the word peace and conflict resolution and what that actually means in real life. So these two communities have been separated like this. You can go visit the walls, and there's some areas where you can cross them. If you go Belfast today, please go after coronavirus. It's very safe for you guys. There's not a problem to go there. And when you go there, you can cross these walls. You can, during the daytime, there's some gates with the police that you can cross. They don't ask any questions, they just let you cross through the gate. But at nighttime, every single gate on those walls is closed. You cannot cross, and you cannot travel to either side of the city through these walls. And these separate the two communities. So like I said, there is more walls in Belfast today than they ever had in Berlin. And these separate the two communities. Let's check the comments section. Miss Sophie's answering all these questions. We said orange, yes, it's kind of an orange color, yeah. And orange is the color for the Protestants, that side of their religion. Their religion is called Protestant, doesn't mean they're protesting, that's just the name of their type of Christianity. Okay, although sometimes they do like to protest as well. So we've got these walls, and they started building these walls quite small, and then the government asked the people, and they said, do you like these walls? Do you want us to take them down? And people said, no, we feel safe beside these walls. Look at these houses beside. I have some friends that grew up in houses like this, and they actually felt safer with these walls. They liked the walls. And instead of asking the government to take them down after 20 years, they said, can you build them higher? Because people are still throwing rocks, they're still throwing, glass bottles, there's still problems. So the government built them higher and higher and higher. And that's what we've got the situation in today. Now, Belfast is not the only city in the world with some walls. I've mentioned Berlin. Does anyone know another place, another city that's divided half and half, and it's got some walls?
Palestine and Israel.
Of course. Thanks, Ibadan. Give me some others.
So America and Mexico.
Oh, excellent. I hope, Hamza, you didn't see that on my slide. I hope you actually knew that. That's very impressive. Okay, so some of you have been to Cyprus. Nicosia is the very divided city. Half of it's owned by the Cypriot government, who've got links to Greece, and the other half's owned by Northern Cyprus, which have got links to Turkey. You have to cross a UN wall to get to both sides. And we talked about the West Bank in Palestine, lots of walls there. They've probably got lots more walls there than we have in Northern Ireland. El Paso, which is a city before USA and Mexico, it was one city. Now it's two cities, half Mexico, half USA. And there's big walls going there. And obviously we've got Berlin as well. Have I missed any? Can you think of another place with walls like this? There's definitely more. Okay, I'm just going to check the chat. Okay, yep, it keeps two groups separate. What contains the peace? The walls keep two groups separate, which stops them fighting. Okay, guys, I've got a lot more I want to go through this. This is going to be another special lesson. We'll continue tomorrow, period 4. We're out of time, and I don't want to make you late for your next class. Got any questions about anything I've got, don't forget them. Keep them. We'll talk about them next lesson, period 4. We'll do another breakout room as well. We might even be nice to you and let you pick your groups for that session. We'll think about that.
There's a wall between India and Pakistan.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, of course. But they're two different countries. It's not one city.
It's just a border.
Yeah, a border is slightly different, but often borders get confused with walls. Okay, guys, we're out of time. Please keep all your thoughts and suggestions. Feel free to go to your period 4 and head over with that. I will continue all of this next lesson on Thursday, tomorrow, and last period. See you guys. Thank you, Mahmoud. Thanks to everyone who read something out or answered. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Abada. Bastami.
Have a good day, sir.
See you guys. Have a good day. Take care of yourselves.
Guys.
See you tomorrow.
See you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day, sir.
See you, Sufyan.
See you guys.